History often remembers the loud parts, the clash of swords, the roar of cannons, the grand speeches of kings and conquerors. We learn about empires rising and falling, about great battles that changed the world. But sometimes, the most powerful stories are whispered, not shouted. They belong to ordinary people who, in the face of extraordinary darkness, chose to shine a light. Today, we're going to one of those quiet corners of history, to a story that has echoed for over 200 years. We're traveling back to France, to the chaotic and bloody heart of the French Revolution. This was a time of immense upheaval, the Reign of Terror. The old world was being torn down, and anything associated with it, the monarchy, the aristocracy, and the church, was seen as an enemy of the new republic. In the name of liberty, equality, and fraternity, thousands were sent to the guillotine. Fear was a weapon, and public executions were a spectacle meant to control the masses. The crowds that gathered were often a mix of angry, scared, and fanatical people, cheering for each head that fell. It was a brutal, merciless environment. In the midst of this chaos, in the town of Tarpeian, lived a small community of 16 Carmelite nuns. They weren't political figures. They weren't revolutionaries or counter-revolutionaries. They were women who had dedicated their lives to prayer and contemplation within the walls of their convent. Their lives were simple, quiet, and devoted to their faith. But the revolution didn't care. In 1790, the new government outlawed religious vows and seized church properties. The nuns were forced out of their convent and told to return to their families and live as ordinary citizens. But they made a promise to each other. They would continue to live their consecrated life together, in secret, even if it meant risking everything. They found a place to live in the town, split into 4 small groups, and continued their prayers and routines as best they could. They knew the danger they were in. The state saw their loyalty to God as an act of treason. For them, it was an act of love. They even made a special vow, offering their lives for the peace of France and for the souls of those caught in the violence of the revolution. They were preparing for the ultimate sacrifice. Their secret couldn't last forever. In June of 1794, they were discovered and arrested. The charge: fanaticism and sedition. Their crime was continuing to live as nuns and having a picture of the former king. They were taken to Paris and thrown into a squalid prison. The trial was a sham. When asked what they were, their prioress, Mother Teresa of St. Augustine, held up a small crucifix she had hidden and said, "This is our king." Their fate was sealed. They were all sentenced to death. On July 17, 1794, the 16 nuns were loaded onto a cart and paraded through the streets of Paris toward the guillotine. This was usually a loud, chaotic journey. The crowds would jeer, insult, and throw things at the condemned. But as the cart carrying the Carmelites moved through the city, something strange happened. The nuns began to sing Te Sancte Miserere, a psalm of mercy, and then the Salve Regina. Their voices, clear and steady, cut through the noise of the city. As they reached the scaffold, the crowd, which was normally a roaring mob, fell silent. The executioner and his assistants seemed unnerved. The nuns continued singing, one by one, starting with the youngest novice. They approached their prioress, knelt to ask for her blessing, and renewed their vows. Then, each woman calmly walked up the steps to the guillotine. The singing continued, but with each execution, one voice was silenced. The song grew fainter and fainter, until only the prioress, Mother Teresa, was left. She was the last to die. After her voice was silenced, an eerie, profound quiet settled over the square. The usual cheers were gone. The crowd stood in stunned silence, deeply moved by what they had witnessed. The story of their martyrdom spread. 10 days after their execution, Robespierre, the architect of the Reign of Terror, was overthrown, and the mass executions came to an end. Many believe the nuns' sacrifice, their offering for peace, had a real, tangible effect. They didn't fight with weapons. They didn't lead an army. They fought with faith, with song, and with a courage that disarmed hatred itself. Their story reminds us that true strength isn't always about winning a battle. Sometimes it's about how you face the end, with your convictions and your dignity intact. They walked their deaths, not in despair, but in hope, leaving behind a legacy of peace that still inspires us today. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the past. If this story moved you, Please like, share, and subscribe for more stories of quiet courage from history. What was life really like in France before the famous revolution of 1789? We often hear about the kings, the queens, and the storming of the Bastille. But what about the everyday lives of ordinary people? Let's take a journey back in time, not to the gilded halls of Versailles, but to the quiet heart of French society. Its faith. Before the revolutionary fervor swept across the land, France was a profoundly religious country. Imagine walking through any town or village. The most prominent building wouldn't be a bank or a government office, but a church. Its steeple would reach towards the sky, a constant landmark in people's lives. The air itself was filled with the sounds of faith. Church bells weren't just for special occasions. They rang out daily, marking the hours for prayer, work, and rest. They were the soundtrack of life. For the average person, the local church was the center of their world. It was where the most significant moments of life unfolded. Babies were baptized there, welcomed into the community. Couples stood at the altar to get married, beginning their new lives together. And when life came to an end, families gathered within its stone walls to say their final goodbyes. The church wasn't just a building you visited on Sundays. It was woven into the very fabric of family and community from birth until death. Beyond the local parish, religious communities of monks and nuns were a vital part of society. Think of them as the original social safety net, who ran the schools where children learned to read and write. Often, it was monks or nuns who cared for the sick and the elderly in hospitals. Again, dedicated religious orders. When a family fell on hard times and needed help, they would often turn to the local monastery or convent for charity. These men and women in religious life weren't isolated from the world. They were deeply involved in it, providing essential services that the state did not. Because of this, the church commanded immense respect. Families looked up to their local priests and bishops as spiritual guides and community leaders. Trust in these religious figures was common. Now, let's talk about a choice that might seem strange to us today. Becoming a nun. We sometimes have this image from movies of young women being forced into convents against their will. While that might have happened in some cases, for many, it was a genuine and respected personal choice. Imagine being a young woman in the 18th century. Your options were often limited. For many, choosing a convent was an empowering decision. It was a path to an education, a life of purpose, and a sense of community with other women. It offered an alternative to marriage and childbirth, a space for quiet contemplation, deep faith, and service to others. These women weren't running away from life. They were running towards a different kind of life, one of prayer, peace, and meaningful work. So, what was life like inside a convent's walls? It was structured and simple, a stark contrast to the chaos that would soon engulf France. A nun's day was built around a rhythm of prayer, which happened several times a day, from early morning to late at night. In between prayers, there was work. This could be tending the gardens, copying manuscripts in the library, weaving textiles, or preparing medicines in the apothecary. Silence was also a key part of the day, allowing for personal reflection and a deeper connection to God. This was the world that existed right before everything changed. A world where faith was not just a private belief, but a public, visible, and essential part of life. Understanding this deeply religious foundation is crucial to understanding the shock and upheaval that the French Revolution would bring, as it sought to tear down this old world and build something entirely new. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey, and imagine this. One day, a new law declares that everything you believe in, your entire way of life, is now illegal. Your community is ordered to disband. Your home is taken away, and you're forced back into a world you chose to leave behind. This isn't a dystopian novel. This was the harsh reality for countless religious communities in France during the late 18th century. The French Revolution, while championing liberty and equality, also brought about a wave of anti-religious sentiment. The government, seeking to consolidate its power and create a secular state, passed laws that systematically dismantled religious institutions. Monasteries and convents, which had been spiritual centers for centuries, were ordered to shut their doors. Monks and nuns, who had dedicated their lives to God, were suddenly told their vows meant nothing. They were forced to leave their cloisters, to shed their religious habits, the very clothes that signified their commitment, and to re-enter a society they had renounced. Public prayer, the cornerstone of their existence, was forbidden. For many, especially nuns, this was a devastating blow. Their convent wasn't just a building. It was their sanctuary, their family, their entire world. The daily rhythm of prayer, contemplation, and communal life was all they knew and all they desired. Leaving meant losing not just a home, but their spiritual identity. Among those caught in this storm were the Carmelite nuns of These women lived a quiet, contemplative life, dedicated to prayer and sacrifice. Their world was one of silence, devotion, and a deep, abiding faith. When the revolutionary government's decree reached their convent walls, it presented them with an impossible choice. They could obey the new laws, abandon their vows, and melt back into secular society. This would mean giving up their spiritual path, betraying the promises they had made to God, and scattering the sisterhood that had become their family. It was the safe option, the path of compliance. Or they could defy the government. They could choose to quietly, secretly, continue their religious life. They could continue to pray together, to support one another, and to live out their vows in defiance of the state. But this path was fraught with danger. Disobedience meant risking arrest, imprisonment, and even death. It was a choice between physical safety and spiritual integrity. What would you do in their position? The Carmelite nuns looked at their situation not with despair, but with faith. They saw this persecution as a test, an opportunity to live out their vows in the most profound way possible. They made a pact, a communal act of consecration. They offered their lives to God, hoping their sacrifice might bring peace to France and an end to the terror that was gripping their nation. They decided to stay together, not in their convent, which was soon confiscated, but in secret renting rooms in the town and continuing their life of prayer. They knew the risks. Every secret mass, every shared prayer, was an act of rebellion in the eyes of the state. Neighbors grew suspicious. The revolutionary committees were always watching, always searching for enemies of the new republic. For a time, they managed to live this hidden life, their faith burning brightly in the shadows. But in a climate of fear and accusation, secrets are hard to keep. Eventually, they were discovered. Accused of being counter-revolutionaries and fanatics, the nuns were arrested. They were charged with the crime of living in a religious community and plotting against the government. Their trial was a sham, their fate sealed before they even entered the courtroom. The verdict was guilty. The sentence was death by the guillotine. As they were transported through the streets of Paris to the place of execution, something remarkable happened. The usually jeering, hostile crowds fell silent. The nuns, instead of showing fear, began to sing. They sang hymns of praise and psalms of hope. As they reached the scaffold, one by one, they renewed their vows and knelt before their prioress for a final blessing. The youngest novice went first, and as the blade fell, the remaining sisters continued to sing, their voices growing fewer but no less resolute. The last to die was the prioress herself. Their powerful, prayerful defiance left an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. Their story serves as a powerful testament to the strength of faith in the face of. Have you ever wondered what true courage looks like? I'm not talking about superheroes or blockbuster movie stunts. I'm talking about the quiet, unshakable bravery that can only come from deep conviction. Today, I want to share a story that has profoundly moved me. A story about a group of nuns who faced an unimaginable choice. Picture this. The world outside their convent walls is descending into chaos. Political turmoil is escalating, and arrests are becoming more frequent, more ruthless. Friends and family, their voices trembling with fear, come to the nuns with desperate pleas. They beg them, please, you must escape. Find a better hiding place. The danger is real. It's getting closer every day. They share grim news of other religious figures, priests and sisters, already thrown into prison, their fates unknown. The message is clear. You are next. The nuns listened. They were not naive. They understood the gravity of the situation perfectly. And yes, they were afraid. How could they not be? They were human, just like you and me. They felt the cold knot of fear in their stomachs, the chilling thought of what might happen. They probably imagined the worst. The interrogations, the prisons, the violence. Fear is a natural, powerful human instinct designed to keep us safe. But for these women, something else was even more powerful. Their fate. It was a force stronger than any fear, more solid than any prison wall. They held a profound belief that their lives were not their own to protect at all costs. Their lives, they believed, belonged to God, not to the shifting, violent whims of politics. This wasn't about defiance, for defiance's sake. It was about loyalty to a higher truth. Their calling wasn't just a job. It was the very essence of their being. To abandon, to run and hide, would be like abandoning themselves. So, they gathered together, not in panic, but in prayer and quiet discussion. In that sacred space, they made a spiritual promise to each other. It was a solemn pact, a vow of the heart. They agreed that no matter what came, they would remain faithful. They would continue their work, their prayers, their service to the community. They would face whatever lay ahead with their heads held high, together. It's so important to understand what this promise meant. This was not a death wish. They weren't seeking martyrdom or looking forward to suffering. That's a common misconception about deep faith. They loved life. They cherished the small joys, the quiet moments of prayer, the community they had built. Their decision was a powerful affirmation of life, not a rejection of it. What they committed to was truth. In a world drowning in lies and propaganda, they chose to live by what they knew to be true. They committed to courage. When everyone else was telling them to cower, they chose to stand firm. And most importantly, they committed to love. Their entire life's purpose was to serve and love God and their neighbors. To flee would mean abandoning the very people who needed them most. The poor, the sick, the scared. Their pact was an ultimate act of love, a promise to not let fear extinguish the light they were meant to share with the world. Think about the sheer strength it took to make that choice. It is one thing to be brave when you have a weapon in your hand or an army at your back. It's another thing entirely to find your strength in complete vulnerability, armed with nothing but faith and love. They chose to live out their convictions, even if the price was the highest one imaginable. Their story isn't just a historical account. It's a timeless lesson. It asks us a question that echoes through the ages. What do you believe in so strongly that you would be willing to face anything for it? What truth in your life is more powerful than your fear? Their story is a testament to the fact that the human spirit, when anchored in something greater than itself, is capable of extraordinary resilience and courage. It's a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about the absence of fear, but about acting in spite of it. Thank you so much for joining me to reflect on this incredible story today. If it moved you as much as it moved me, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories that inspire and make us think. I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. What does courage mean to you? Until next time, take care. Life in hiding was incredibly difficult. A world shrunk to the confines of shadows and whispers. The simple act of gathering, something we often take for granted, became a luxury they could no longer afford. Openly meeting was a risk too great to bear. So they existed in small, isolated pockets, connected only by a shared, unspoken struggle. Their days were marked by a constant, gnawing hunger. Food was scarce, a precious commodity rationed with painstaking care. Each meager portion was a reminder of their precarious existence, a test of their endurance. To stay unnoticed, they became ghosts in their own neighborhood. They learned to tread lightly, to avoid the familiar faces of neighbors they once greeted with a smile. Every casual glance from a passerby felt like a potential threat. Every footstep outside their door a possible discovery. The world outside was a source of constant anxiety. The sound of a knock, a sharp, sudden rap on the door, would send a jolt of pure fear through their bodies. In that split second, 100 worst-case scenarios would flash through their minds. It was a life lived on the edge of a knife, where every moment was steeped in uncertainty and dread. Yet, in the midst of this suffocating fear and deprivation, something remarkable happened. Their faith, rather than crumbling under the immense pressure, did not weaken. It became their anchor in a raging storm. They found new, quieter ways to practice their beliefs. Prayers were no longer proclaimed in a congregation but whispered in the quiet corners of their hiding places. Each word a silent testament to their devotion. The hymns they once sang with full-throated joy were now hummed softly, melodies muted so that no one outside their small circle could hear. These quiet acts of worship were not diminished by their secrecy. Instead, they gained a profound and powerful intimacy. They discovered strength not in grand gestures, but in small, human connections. A shared smile across a dimly lit room could convey more encouragement than 1,000 words. A gentle touch on the shoulder was a promise of solidarity, a reminder that they were not alone in their struggle. They learned to communicate in a language of quiet support, building each other up when spirits flagged. These simple acts of kindness became the bedrock of their community, a lifeline that kept them from succumbing to despair. It's a strange paradox, but even surrounded by constant danger, a sense of peace began to fill their hearts. This wasn't a peace born of ignorance or denial, but a deep, resilient calm that grew from their convictions. They started to see their suffering not as a meaningless punishment, but as something that held a deeper purpose. They held on to the belief that even in the darkest of times, their trials had meaning, that they were part of a larger, unseen story. This conviction gave them an extraordinary perspective. They held fast to the belief that love, in its purest and most resilient form, could ultimately conquer hatred. It was a radical idea in a world that seemed dominated by chaos and violence, but it was the core of their strength. This powerful belief acted as a shield for their minds and souls. It allowed them to find a sense of inner calm, even when the world outside was descending into madness. Their faith wasn't just a set of rituals. It became a source of profound psychological and spiritual fortitude. It gave them the ability to face the unimaginable with courage and to hold on to hope when all hope seemed lost. Their story is a powerful reminder that even in the most crushing of circumstances, the human spirit, fortified by faith and community, can find a way to endure and even find peace. Thank you for watching.